Hi there. Welcome to Buckeye Bigfoot. They say the woods don't always want to give up their secrets, and if you go poking around in the wrong holler, well, you just might stumble into something that never meant for you to see it. Tonight's journey into Sasquatch Valley is going to take us to a remote stretch of creek up in Arkansas, where a simple summer fishing trip turned into a long, terrifying evening for one man. He thought he was alone. Well, that's a mistake we're not going to make, are we? So go on, grab your snackage, and let's mount up. The horses are out there waiting, and it's a long journey tonight down in the darkness to Sasquatch Valley. Let's go. I've been fishing the same bend of Little Mill Creek since I was a teenager. It's a slow, meandering stretch of water that runs several miles from where it leaves the Mulberry River. Where I go, it's remote. Most people don't have the patience to get there, and that's why I like it. Now, out there, the only sounds you hear are the water rolling over the gravel and the cicadas buzzing around in the heat. It was a scorcher the day I'm remembering. Mid-July, with the kind of humidity that makes your shirt stick to your back on the short walk from your front door to the truck in your driveway. I parked my old Silverado where I usually did, and then hiked in with a small tackle box, a can of worms, and a cooler slung over my shoulder. My plan was simple. Catch a mess of smallmouth, maybe a cat or two, and then camp the night on the gravel bar or just inside the tree line. I'd done it dozens and dozens of times before. The creek there was low from a dry spell, and that made the deep bend perfect. Dark pools undercut banks where the fish liked to hole up. I spent a good 2 hours pulling them in, one right after the other. As it got later, the sun dropped behind the ridge just right, turning the water in front of me into pure gold. It was one of those afternoons that just feels right. You know the ones I mean. The kind that you're going to pull out of your memory when you're really old. And when you do, you will feel it all over again. Knowing this, I breathed deep and watched the gold ripple on the creek water, just drinking it into my memory. After a little bit, I did start thinking that maybe it was time to set up camp. And that's when I noticed something strange. I walked up and down the creek a little bit, looking for where I wanted to set my camp. I usually did not set camp up first thing because, well, sometimes the best place I find for my camp is not near the best place I find to fish that day. I did that one time, and I came back to an almost empty campsite. As unlikely as it had been, someone had found my camp, assumed it was abandoned, I hope, and they decided to take everything. My tent, my bedroll, everything, down to the kindling I had split. So I go walking, and about 30 yards downstream, where the creek shallows out into a wide, pebbly stretch, I saw a strange mark in the gravel. At first, I thought maybe it was just where a log had been washed up and shifted around. But the more I looked, the more what I saw didn't sit right. It was a drag mark. 2 of them, actually. Deep furrows cutting across the gravel bar and then disappearing deep into the tree line. And whatever had made them had been very heavy. We're not talking about some deer carcass tumbling downstream. These were steady and deliberate marks, as if something had hauled a very big weight against the flow of the creek. Curiosity got the better of me. I crouched down beside the marks. They were about 3 feet apart, with odd little crescent-shaped gouges along the edges, almost like claws or fingertips had been dug down into the stones as whatever it was dragged its load. The tracks led straight off the bar, deep into the tree line, where the ground there turned soft and dark. Now, I grew up hunting and trapping, like a lot of other men in the area. I know the sign of coyotes hauling a kill, or a bear dragging a deer. This was not that. It was too neat, very deliberate. I told myself it was probably just a hog or a big cat. Still, I couldn't shake the itch in my brain about it. Something was off. Dusk was starting, and the light was fading fast, and I knew I didn't have much time. So, like an absolute fool, I grabbed my flashlight and followed the trail into the woods. The canopy there swallowed me up fast. The further I went, the quieter and the darker it got. No birds, no frogs. Even the creek noise faded behind me into silence. But the drag marks kept going. Up a shallow incline, across a mat of pine needles, and into a little hollow that was maybe 50 yards from the water. That's when I smelled it. It hit me like a rotten punch straight to the face. It was a mix of carrion and damp, moldy earth. I gagged a little, clamped my hand over my nose, and I swept the light way ahead of me. That's when I saw the clearing. It was maybe 20 feet across, ringed with young pines and littered with bones. Not just deer bones, either. There were ribs, femurs, and skulls from all kinds of forest critters. I saw raccoon, possum, possibly even some coyote skulls, and what looked like a hog. All of them were piled and scattered around like some kind of weird feeding ground. But what stopped me cold was a femur half buried near the base of a stump. That was much bigger and thicker than any deer leg I'd ever seen. It looked human. I felt the hair on my neck rise. That was the first moment I thought, I should leave right now. I turned to go back the way I came, and that's when I heard the splash. It was distant, faint but unmistakable. Something heavy had stepped into the creek. Then there was another splash, then another. They were slow and deliberate, coming closer and closer in a direct beeline for my position. Perhaps I could have went out 90 degrees deeper into the woods and away from what was coming, but a very strange curiosity kept me right there. I killed my light, crouched low, my heart thudding so hard I was sure that whatever was coming my way would be able to hear it. Then I heard it again. Not the water this time, but the sound of footsteps, first on wet stone. Not the four-legged shuffle of a bear or a hog. These were definitely two-footed bipedal steps. Heavy, spaced apart, just like a man wading upstream. Only I knew it wasn't a man. It couldn't be. I crouched there in the darkness for what felt like several minutes, but was probably maybe 20 or 30 seconds, straining to listen. The splashing had stopped, and now the forest had gone completely silent again. And then from somewhere just beyond the tree line, where the creek gravel met the trees, I heard a low, guttural huff. It was deep and resonant, sort of like a bull exhaling through a barrel chest. The deep huff cycled 3 more times with a long pair of seconds in between. It was as if it was drawing in more breath between each one. The huffs were measured, even, and forceful. That's when I knew. It could smell me. It knew I was there. And it wasn't curious or afraid of me. In fact, I felt it was warning me. The sound of the huff seemed to hang in the air forever, deep, primal, and close. I'd been in the woods most of my life, and I'd never heard anything like it. It wasn't a bear's chuff or a deer's snort. This was heavier, deeper, and it was meant to let me know it knew I was there, and that I was standing in a place I did not belong. Every instinct I had screamed for me to turn tail and run, but the thought of crashing through that brush blindly and noisily with whatever it was so close, that didn't sit right either. I needed eyes on it. I needed to know what it was and where it was before I moved. So I stayed there crouched, breathing shallow and slow, listening for movement. At first, there was nothing. No water, no brush, not even the faintest rustle. Then, soft as a breath, came the sound of wet gravel shifting. One step, then another, slow, deliberate, coming closer. Then the footsteps were muffled, telling me it had left the creek area and was now in the trees. It came to within about 10 yards of me and came no closer. Instead, it began to pace back and forth just beyond the hollow area where I was crouched, moving parallel to me. I heard each heavy footstep as it hit the ground. Every few seconds it would stop, and I would hear that deep huff. It would roll out into the darkness again, low, measured, like it was sniffing and checking the air in between. I had left my .357 back with my main supplies. That's something I never do. I had been lulled that afternoon into the beauty and the quiet of the area. Yes, I do know better. Before you start preaching, I absolutely know better. But when I started walking and looking for a camp place, I had zero intention of going very far, and not into the woods. But I'm not the only man to fail to see into the future, to plan for it, and to mess up. All I had on me was a 6-inch fillet knife on my belt and a mag light that suddenly felt more like a heavy liability than a tool. My hands were slick with sweat, and my heart was pounding so loud I was sure it would give my position away. After a few minutes, I lulled myself into believing it must have moved on. I wasn't hearing the huffing or any footsteps. Then, just when I thought it had moved on, a branch snapped. Loud, sharp, no more than 30 feet to my left. I froze. I turned slowly to look. A shape moved between the trees. Big, too big for a deer. It ghosted from trunk to trunk, silent as smoke, but every so often I'd catch a real glimpse of it. A hulking mass moving in the fading light, there and then gone again. And then I saw it was circling me. I eased backward, slowly as I could, trying not to crunch the pine needles under my boots. My plan was simple. Get back to the creek, follow it downstream, and put as much distance between me and whatever this was stalking me, as much as I could. But plans don't mean much when you're not the one in control. Something thudded into the ground barely a foot from where I was crouching, heavy enough to send a small spray of soil across my boots. I jumped back, barely stifling a curse. When I aimed my light, I saw it. A large river rock, bigger than a softball. It was now half buried in the dirt. That thing circling me had thrown it. And it wasn't guessing where I was. That stone landed just mere inches from me. That was a very accurate throw. That thing is accurate with its aim, make no mistake. It simply miscalculated the force needed to put that throw to reach me and make contact. And it was just miscalculated by a few inches. It missed me, only barely. I can't imagine if it had hit me or made a headshot. I wasn't waiting for another one to come. I turned and started backing down the slope toward the water. My light was off, stepping quickly but carefully. This was not the time to stumble or twist or break my ankle. My heart was racing now, and I could feel that thing shadowing me. Branches moving close enough I could hear them. A faint crack of wood now and then, but always just out of sight. But it was close. When I broke through the tree line and I saw the glint of light on the creek from the slowly rising moon, I nearly sobbed with relief. I figured if I could get into the shallows and follow the water downstream, I might just lose that thing. I was halfway to the bank when I heard the sound that darn near stopped my heart. 2 footsteps, then 3, then 4. There was no rush in the steps I heard. That thing knew right where I was and how to get to me. Those footsteps were coming straight for me. I spun, flicked my flashlight on, and swept it across the clearing. Nothing there, just trees and brush and darkness. I swung the beam back the other way, and that's when I saw it. It was standing about 20 yards away, half hidden behind a sycamore as wide around as a truck tire. The light caught just enough to paint a picture that I will never forget. A massive, barrel-chested figure, easily 7.5 feet tall, its shoulders nearly brushing the lower limbs. The hair was dark and matted, hanging in coarse sheets over muscles that moved like coiled rope beneath. And the face. Well, God help me. That face was not like an ape's. It was much closer to ours, with a heavy brow, deep-set eyes glowing faint red in the light beam, and a mouth that was pulled into something that wasn't quite a snarl, but was not far from it. It blinked once, slow and deliberate. Then it stepped out from behind the tree. I don't remember making the decision to run. My body must have made it for me. I bolted for the creek, stumbling over rocks and roots, splashing into the shallows hard enough to nearly lose my footing. Behind me, branches cracked, loud, fast, and closing the distance. I tore downstream, the water dragging at my boots, heart hammering in my throat. Then it all stopped. No footsteps, no crashing, just the sound of the creek and my own ragged breathing. I turned, gasping, and scanned the bank with the flashlight. Nothing. Empty. Silent. I stood there for more than a full minute, shaking, waiting for it to come charging out of the trees. But it didn't. But I know it was there, somewhere in the darkness, watching. And then, faint but unmistakable, came that same low, chest-deep huff. This time it wasn't as close. It was distant, maybe 100 feet back. And that's when I knew. That huff was a warning. It was showing me the boundary, the line I was not to cross again. Well, I wasn't going to test it. I have only a vague memory of scooping up my gear. I didn't stop moving until I was back at my truck. I don't even remember the hike back. I barely have a memory of throwing my gear into the bed of my truck, then peeling out of there with the windows down, and my heart feeling as if it was trying to punch its way out of my chest. When I told this story to someone that I loved and trusted, they listened. Then they told me the area there is known for that kind of activity and pointed out things like Devil's Canyon Trail, Devil's Canyon waterfalls, then Sasquatch's Cave, and other things nearby where I was. I mean, yeah, I had heard those names my whole life, but they were just names. They didn't mean anything to me. It was no different to me than something like the Mulberry River. I don't think the Mulberry River is full of mulberries or has its banks lined with mulberry bushes. I don't think Hurricane Creek is one big hurricane or that a hurricane ever went down that creek. I don't think Wire Road is full of wires. So I never once thought that Devil's Canyon, waterfalls, or anything else was full of devils. You see what I mean? But now I know it was probably all referencing Sasquatch in the area, probably over the last century or two. I now pay more attention to those kinds of names for places, because what happened to me was between those areas and the Mulberry River. So, yeah, there might be something to it. I'm going to send you the Google shot of the area, just so you know. I have never been back to that part of the creek. Not once. Probably never. I now fish on other creeks that don't lead to places with the words like devil and Sasquatch in them. But there are times late at night, when the wind's right, I swear to you, I can still hear that sound in my head, that heavy, deliberate huff. And I remember what it felt like to stand in a place that didn't belong to me when I crossed a boundary I didn't know was there. Here in North America, most of us think the deep woods, well, they're as free and wild as you can imagine, open to any of us brave enough to walk them. But maybe that's not quite so true everywhere. Maybe there are still corners of this world that belong to something older, something that does not want to be seen. And if you're lucky like tonight's writer, it will let you walk away. Because some places, they're just not meant for us. And some secrets, well, the woods do not want you to find. Well, folks, that's almost all I have for you tonight. I do want to remind you that I will be up at the Mercer County Fairgrounds at the Bigfoot Festival there on Friday and Saturday, October 24th and 25th. Now, the event itself is free, But if you want to hear certain speakers or go to the VIP dinner, you will need to buy tickets. And I suggest you do so because they are selling out fast. If you're interested, I'll put the link to the website in the video description below. And listen up, Sasquatch. I know most of you already know this, but for those of you that are new here, or if you would just like a more portable way to listen to Buckeye Bigfoot, we have a podcast form available. You can search for our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Or if you have an Amazon device like I do sitting right here on my desk, just say, Alexa, play the latest podcast from Buckeye Bigfoot.
Getting Buckeye Bigfoot from Amazon Music. Here's episode 35, From the Vault, Bigfoot's Nest of Bones.
All right, folks, that was my Amazon device right here on my desk, answering and getting ready to play the next podcast from Buckeye Bigfoot. So see how easy it is? Just talk to your Amazon device. The last thing I want to mention tonight is that I am now taking submissions for the annual Halloween Marathon. Now, if you have an extra scary or spooky encounter, go on, send it in. Just be sure to mention the Halloween Marathon somewhere in the email so I know that's what you intend it for. And while I'm at it, you know what? Heck, I'm just going to go wild. I'm going to go ahead and open up submissions for the 12 days of Squatchmas. So if you have a winter story with a Bigfoot or something that's Christmas related or just anything you might fit, go on, send it in. Just be sure to tell me it's for the 12 days of Squatchmas. All right, folks, that really does wrap up tonight's journey down into Sasquatch Valley. I hope you had a good ride. I know I did. And I want to say thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. It is always better with your company. I'll be seeing you again when we gather for the next journey down into the dark heart of Sasquatch Valley. But until then, I need you to remember 2 things. 1, absence of proof is not proof of absence. And 2, now there are some boundaries you should never cross. Thanks for listening, folks.